It's time for Voice of Indie. Your hosts today are Beem Weeks, author, producer, and marketing monster for independent multimedia publisher Fresh Ink Group, and Stephen Gies, author, producer, composer, and publisher for Fresh Ink Group.
Hey, greetings and welcome to another Wednesday night with the Voice of Indie podcast. I'm your host, Beem Weeks, and I'm looking out my back window here at a beautiful sunset here in Michigan, and I see over there in the Alabama corner is my co-host, Stephen Gies. How are you feeling tonight, Stephen?
Yeah, I've been better. I've not been well for the last 3 days. I went and visited a friend on Sunday night, and he had spent the day at his sister's house, and now everybody in his sister's family is sick, and he got sick, and then Monday I came down with it. So I've been having a fun old time, but I wish I had your nice weather. We've had storms all week, and they've been on and off and dropping a lot of rain, thunder, lightning, whatnot, and we've had some serious wind. Those of you who keep up with the weather news know that there's been tornadoes across Alabama this past week or two, and we had the courthouse here in town got hit. We have 102-year-old oak trees, massive oak trees that got taken down. And if you want to see pictures of that, go over to my Instagram, which is Stephen Gies Writer, or my Facebook, which is Gary Stephen Gies, and you can see pictures of those. I also posted a picture today of some wood ducks. We have 4 wood duck boxes out here in the water right next to the pier, and this time of year, the wood ducks literally line up waiting for a turn to get into one of those boxes and lay their eggs. Each of those boxes winds up with 2-3 dozen eggs from a bunch of different ducks, and then they just all hang around waiting for all those things to hatch. So get over to my social media, and you can see some cool pictures of those things.
Yeah, and speaking of Instagram, you go over to Instagram. Fresh Ink Group has 2 Instagram accounts. There's at Fresh Ink Group, and there's at FIG Publishing, FIG Publishing. And this show here, Voice of Indie, has an Instagram account as well. And over there, it's a lot of photos and artwork and things like that. That's what we kind of promote over there. But we've also got a couple of Facebook pages for Fresh Ink Group. Actually, we've got 3 of them. We've got Fresh Ink Group Indie Books and Trailers. That's what it's called, Indie Books and Trailers. Then we have Fresh Ink Group LLC, and we have Fresh Ink Group Kids Books. So there's all kinds of cool things to see over there. We post stuff on a pretty regular basis. We share other people's work over there too. So if you're looking for a new read, guess what? You can find them over there because that's what we share. So there you go.
Now remember, if you want to get the announcements for these podcasts, we're going to start expanding those announcements next week so that when you get them each week, it's not just an announcement, but also some information on new books, new videos we've put out, other things like that. So it'll be a quick little mini newsletter, keeping you updated on what's going on with Fresh Ink Group. Plus, the link to the podcast that very night should be in that same thing. I want to mention, too, that, as I said, I haven't been feeling well the last couple of days. Yesterday, I was a guest on Pen for Hire's podcast hosted by Matthew Harms, who was a guest on this podcast a couple of months ago. He did a publishing industry roundtable, and there's some really fascinating people on there talking about all kinds of aspects of the industry, including one woman that I was very fascinated with, talking about how to shepherd various projects into screenplays and how to make the connections to try to get deals for writing scripts for television, movies, YouTube channels, and things like that, too. So at any rate, during that podcast, I started feeling sick. So when I get the link to it, we're going to put it out there. But at one point during the podcast, you're going to see me kind of disappear off the bottom of the screen while I was grabbing for a wastebasket. But we were really struggling. Matthew Harms, the host, had COVID, and he was struggling too. You could see it. But there's still a great podcast. We'll put that link out there when we get it, and you guys can get over there and check out some of those things. But like I said, I haven't been feeling real well, so if that happens again during tonight's show and I drop out, we'll just let Beem take over with our guest. But I wanted to be here because our guest is somebody I've wanted to interview for a long time. Beem has had the privilege of interviewing him before, but this will be my first time.
Yeah, twice actually. I've interviewed our guest before at the old show, but this is the first time we've had him on this one. Yeah, listeners, if you want to leave a comment or if you have a question for tonight's guest or anything else, but preferably for the guest, get over to Twitter and type in the hashtag Fresh Ink Group, and we will see your question and we will read it on the air, question or comment. How else can they join us, Stephen?
They can call in. Call 516-453-9902. That's 516-453-9902, and we'll put you on the air. You can talk to us, talk to the guest, make a comment, ask a question, give your opinions, whatever it is that you want to do. We're looking forward to having you call in.
And if you miss any of these programs, we do have them extensively archived, so there's not an episode that you can miss and not catch. We've got them in our archives on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and type in Fresh Ink Group, and while you're there, please hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, and share these videos on your social media. We got book trailers over there. We got all of these programs over there, and we've got some other things as well. So just go over there and hit that subscribe button and help us build that audience over there. And if you don't want to go to YouTube, you can go to freshinkgroup.com and hit the podcast button. Go to beamweeks.com, hit the podcast button, or go to stephengs.com and hit the podcast button, and those shows will be there for you to listen to. And we're also on Spotify. So just go to Spotify, type in Voice of Indy or The Voice of Indy. I believe it's just Voice of Indy. And there you go. It'll pop up, and every episode we've done is right there. And it'll tell you who's on the show, and there you go, and how long it is. And usually they're about an hour, though. So
now, Fresh Ink Group's been busy the last week or two, despite the fact that it hasn't been my most productive week. Sometime tomorrow or so, we'll be publishing the book Sassy Discovers the AME Church, which is a children's book, and we're going to invite its author, B.A. Johnson, to be a guest on the podcast, probably in a couple of weeks. We're about to publish, probably later this week, Crimes and the People Who Commit Them by Phil Lippert. We hope to invite him on, too. Those are true. Many of them are true stories or fictionalized true stories that he wrote from conversations he had while he was spending 42 years in prison, which was interrupted by, I believe it was a 5-year escape. So he's definitely got some stories to tell. We're going to be republishing one of Gwen Plano's books. I'm not going to say the title right now because it's populating as I speak. It's starting to appear on various retailers' websites as of today. So next week, not only will we talk about that in greater detail. I'm not saying the title because I don't want you to go look. You'll see an old edition at a lot of places right now. But next week, our guest will be Gwen Plano, and she'll be talking about it. And we're also looking to publish in about a week or so the new Mac McDowell Mission series book by Robert G. Williscroft called Operation Arctic Sting.
Yeah, and like you said, Gwen Plano next week, so tune in. Now, we've had her on the show before early on during our run here, but as Stephen just said, she's got a book coming out, so we're going to bring her back and promote the heck out of this book. Yeah,
and we'll be doing that with Robert G. Williscroft, too, assuming we can talk him into coming on the show again.
Yeah.
Okay, our guest today, somebody that I've been wanting to talk to for a long time. I've been fascinated by his work. He's got a 5-book memoir series. His name is Bernard Foong, and let me get over here to his bio. He's got several bios, and they're all very long because he has a lot to say. He has done quite a bit in his time. And I chopped this bio down a little bit, but I decided just to read a long version for you because there really is that much to say. So sit back, grab yourself a drink, and let's learn about Bernard Foong, who writes under the name Young, Y-O-U-N-G. Born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, at the age of 8, he was assisting his aunt and cousin learning the art of sewing and fabrics colors matching. He attended an exclusive private boarding school in the United Kingdom before obtaining his diploma in fashion design at the Harrow College of Art and Technology in London. He went on to complete his Master of Design at the Royal College of Art and Design. During his college years, he won several international fashion awards and was already retailing bridal and evening dresses to several well-known department stores in England. For 4 years, he worked for Liberty's bridal department as their in-house designer until a trip to Hong Kong while working on a freelance project for Bird's Casual Wear Company. He was recruited by the Hong Kong Polytechnic Institute as their fashion professor for the next 6 years. During his stay in Hong Kong, he freelanced for numerous fashion companies, from designing casual wear, swimwear, lingerie, and fur garments, menswear, bridal and evening fashions, to accessories like bags, shoes, and headwear. He also participated and organized numerous fashion shows, events, functions, and presentations in the Asia-Pacific region. Working for Keys Far East Hong Kong as the chief lingerie designer, traveling extensively to the United States, he was soon recruited as an associate fashion design illustration professor to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and also lectured at the Minneapolis College of Arts Design for a couple of years. He was then appointed as the fashion development manager by an established department store, Parks and Grand, with 22 stores in Malaysia and 1 in Shanghai. Producing under the label Natural Life by Bernard Foong, he designed casual wear collections for the Parks and Grand's flagship store in Kuala Lumpur. After a couple of years later, he was invited by the Temasek Polytechnic, Singapore, to join their design school to establish a fashion design department. For 2 years, he assisted several founding members of the design school working on the fashion department's teaching curriculum. The Fitzgerald Theater Department, University of Hawaii, Manoa, Oahu, Hawaii, awarded him a full scholarship to complete his second Master of Art in Theater Costuming. Now a resident on the island of Maui, he has assisted many charity organizations in their fundraising events with his extravagant fashion and performance shows. In 2005, he and his partner, Mr. Walter J. Bissett, opened Fire Dragon Bistro Orient and Design Shop. He also designs costumes and fashions for numerous theatrical productions in Hawaii and abroad. Appointed as the chief lingerie designer for Siri International Limited, Hong Kong, his lingerie designs can be found in major department stores in Canada and the United Kingdom. He showcased the Bernard Foong RTW collections in Bernard Foong at Modern Classic Limited, an established Hong Kong bridal and evening wear company. His 2008-2009 Bridal Evening Bridal Lingerie fashion show, Grace and Coming Up Roses, were premiered at Hong Kong Fashion Week at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center, garnering definite interest in many Asian press reviews, including a China nationwide television broadcast of his latest collection. International opera singer Aika wore several of Bernard Foong's special occasion dresses at her Japan and European tour. Foong was appointed as the chief creative director for Official, which is special occasion fashion manufacturing company in Guangzhou, and I don't know if I pronounced that right, Guangzhou, China, producing Bernard Foong Couture, including brands like Foxy Cute, Sex Z Things, and Diva Bitch collections. Foong has just completed his autobiographic 5-book series of his young life called A Harem Boy's Saga, a memoir by Jung. This intriguing story, spanning 4 decades and 3 continents, is about a boy, and this is Bernard, about a boy who was sent to a very exclusive English boarding school in the 1960s, where he was initiated into a clandestine sexual society and then spirited away to serve in wealthy and elite Middle Eastern harems. That's an interesting bio. Welcome to the show, Bernard.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
I have a question right off the bat. Now, you were born in Malaysia. You grew up basically in the UK, and you live in the United States now, in Hawaii. So what's your citizenship like? Do you hold like a triple citizenship, a double citizenship?
No, I gave up my Malaysian citizenship when I moved to England. I've never felt Malaysia to be my home, but when I went to England, I immediately, love. I love Europe. So England was a stepping stone to the rest of the continent, the European continent, and I very quickly became a British citizen. I'm a subject of the Queen if that's what you can call it.
Was that pun intended?
So now that I'm married and living in on Maui with my beloved husband, he's American. So I'm here on a work permit, like a permanent resident permit.
Okay.
I'm not a citizen, and I think I'll keep it like that.
Okay.
And you are planning to move to the mainland soon, is that right?
Yeah. I've been in Hawaii, or rather on Maui, for 27 years, and it's about time, to explore the mainland and to see more of America, so to speak. Because I don't consider Hawaii as America. It's kind of like in the middle of the ocean, and it's so far away from everywhere.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Now
it's very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
it's what, 2:00 there in the afternoon?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And now I think it's about 2:15 now.
Yeah, it's 8:15 here in the evening.
7:15 here. So if your name is Bernard Foong, but you're writing under the name Young, Y-O-U-N-G, can you tell us about that?
Sure. When I was in boarding school, I have a Chinese name. When I was in school, when I was enrolled at the boarding school, my mother enrolled me with my Chinese name, which is Fong Cheng Yong. Yong is really my name, but most of my classmates can pronounce Yong, so I became Yang instead. That's why I'm writing it under Yang.
Okay. So that's
and
where
most people.
That's how you'd be listed on Amazon, right?
Yeah. And most people in my school, in the boarding school, knows me as Yang rather than Yong.
Okay.
And
now,
Bernard didn't come about. Yeah, Bernard didn't come about until later, after I left college.
Okay. Now, growing up, originally in Malaysia, what was your family like?
I think in the first book, Initiation, I talked the first 15 chapters. I talked about my family dynamics. My mom and my dad's relationship was very strange in more ways than one, because father was kind of man's man, and this was in the 40s when they got married, and I have two brothers, blood brothers, and both of them inverted commas heterosexual boys. So father kind of got them to do all sorts of sports and stuff, and my mother wanted a daughter very badly, but she didn't have me until this was back in 1953. The year before, her relationship with my dad was in a turmoil because my dad was a womanizer, and he had a mistress, and mother found out, and mother went on an extensive cruise on the Queen Mary just to get away from her marital problems. And on the cruise, she met a very distinguished English gentleman, which I call Uncle James. And Uncle James became her confidant. And Uncle James used to work for the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation as the CFO. And he spoke, perfect Mandarin, and mother spoke Mandarin, so they became good friends. And it was then after mother returned to after her tour, my dad and her made up, sort of, and on the tour, my mother, because she wanted a daughter so badly, she bought a lot of dolls and baby girls' clothes, expecting that if she ever have a child again, it would be a girl. So I spent my first 4 years of my life playing with dolls and wearing baby girls' clothes, which I don't mind because I have a nanny, and every time the nanny pushed me around in my pink pram, people would adore me thinking I was a girl. So it doesn't bother me at all. And then Mom pampered me, throughout, and basically she was into the artistic community, and she enrolled me in ballet classes, piano classes, art classes, whereas Dad, would always want me to do judo, karate, and I hated it. So my relationship with my dad wasn't a very positive one. And eventually, I knew I was going to go to England. So, because all my brothers were educated in England, so I was waiting in line, so to speak, to go abroad, just to get away from my dad.
Since you were so much younger, your brothers were off at school when you were young?
Yes, both of my brothers were. My eldest brother went to boarding, not the same boarding school, but a different boarding school at the age of 13. And my second brother finished high school in Malaysia and then went on to law school in England.
So it was like being an only child for a while there.
Yes, but my mother, on my mother's side, we had a lot of relatives with Asian families. There are lots of cousins and aunties, and I had a favorite cousin, which is the daughter of my mother's brother, and we became pals, and we were very close. So we would play dress up, and since I had an extensive doll collection, we played with the dolls, and I designed clothes for the dolls. That's how I became interested in fashion.
Okay, and it's obviously a wealthy family. What did your father do?
My father was an entrepreneur, and he did a lot of different things. He had a nightclub, and the nightclubs, this was back in the 50s, the mid to late 50s, and he had quite an enterprising establishment where he had all these shows. This was during the Roger and Hammerstein movies, like The King and I and Flower Drum Song, all these wonderful movies, and he would have musical evenings at the nightclub, and it was very strange that he would get me to design the costumes and the show clothes for my cousins who were performing at these events. So that's how I started. I started designing clothes at about 9 years old.
Wow. Good for you.
This was in Malaysia?
Yes, this was in Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah. Okay,
Beem, I think we need to run a commercial here real quick, and then I understand we have a caller waiting.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Managing pain with opioids is a science. Except politics, money, and overzealous law enforcement are denying American patients the relief they so desperately need. Demonizing the best pain reliever we have leads to needless suffering, even suicides, and it drives the rise in deadly street drugs. Helen Burrell gathers and presents the evidence, the intimidation, the raids of clinics, the chilling effect on those very professionals we trust to care for our loved ones and ourselves. She looks hard at the Veterans Administration, Drug Enforcement Agency, Department of Justice, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Chapters include the Suboxone hoax, the wrong arms of the law, and the epidemic of death. Now in hardcover, softcover, and all e-book formats, American Agony is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group. Read American Agony now, or you might be the next one hurt.
Yes, that is an eye-opening book there. So you might want to go out and check that out. And even if you think it doesn't concern you, it does.
Yeah, you might be surprised by some of the things you read in there.
Yeah.
So listeners, call in 516-453-9902 or post a question or comment on Twitter using hashtag #FreshAimGroup. And Beem, you have a caller.
We do. Let's go to the phones and find out who this is. Hello, caller. What is your name and where are you calling from?
I'm Walter Bissett calling from Maui.
Hi, Walter. Welcome to the show.
Walter.
How are you guys?
We're having fun. We're having fun talking to your husband.
Oh, good.
So what's on your mind?
Well, I just thought I would ask Mr. Foong some questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That's perfectly okay.
Well, I've read all of his books and think that they're brilliant. And,
they are.
Stunningly beautiful at times and very romantic and extremely interesting. As I understand it, he is. There's possibly a film of book one underway, and so I guess my first question would be: does he have any update on that and what's going on? I know, this business of COVID has not been kind to any industry, certainly not the film industry. So maybe he can enlighten us.
Sure. The film deal was done through my book agent, who also acted as my film agent, and her name is Amarantia, and Amarantia kept promising me that it's happening and that it is still in pre-production. And that was the last I heard of it. I'm going to contact her again end of this month when I get my book royalties. Every month, thank God, I get some book royalties. It's not that great, but, it's something to cheer me up. And I will certainly put that question to her and find out how far along the book, the film is coming. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. To a degree, yes. So another question I have is, have you been in touch with, your seemingly the love of your life, Andy, in your book? Have you been in touch with him?
The love of my life is you.
Oh.
Nice save, Bernard.
Yeah. That sounded like a setup.
That's a surprise. Who would have guessed,
Even though
right?
you don't think so.
So what about Andy?
Yes, what about Andy?
Yeah, what about Andy, Bernard? How's he doing? Have you heard from him?
Well, the last I heard was that he was recuperating from an open surgery, and for his kidney, and or rather, having a kidney transplant. That was about the last I heard of him, and he seems to be recuperating. This was before COVID, and I haven't heard anything since that. So, and he's already married to another nice Japanese person, and so I don't know. I don't keep in touch with him all the time.
I see. Understood.
We do have to agree with you about his beautiful writing. It's lyrical. I mean, he just paints beautiful artistic images, even of ugly situations that some people, might be a little off-put by, but he finds the beauty in every aspect of the way he's lived his life, and that's a beautiful thing.
Definitely.
Well, in my boarding school, we are taught to look at the positive sides of things rather than the negative. And I suppose I was brought up that way. And in the boarding school, all the boys have a big brother. It's an all-boys school. So all the boys is allocated a big brother, which is about 5 years older than us, who, and in my case, Andy, who was my big brother for 4 years, at the different Arab households, he taught me a lot of a lot of positive things about life, and I tend to look at life in a very in a light-hearted way, but at the same time I don't treat serious subjects lightheartedly, but it's just the way you react to them. It depends on the person, really. And I'm not one of those people that are negative most of the time.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negativity in the world today, and we don't need to keep adding to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have any more questions, Mr. Bissett?
Well, I would like to ask, because, people often make the assumption that young boys are being coerced into doing things that maybe they don't want to, or, so Bernard, did you ever feel, even, in the process of this, did you ever feel coerced or like you had to do something that you weren't comfortable doing?
Not that I can remember, because you see, when I went into, when I was recruited, or I had the opportunity to be recruited into this clandestine program, the 5 boys that they select each year to enter the society is all handpicked, and we had to go to a 9-month vigorous program to make sure that we are mature enough to handle situations and not be freaked out or be scared of things that might for people that are not so mature, that might not be able to handle it. And of course, our big brothers were always there to guide us and to advise us, because like I said, Andy had been in that program, not just with me, but before me. He had been in the secret society for a number of years, and he himself had a big brother that assisted him in more ways than one, and so he was basically doing his share to help me along and to guide me. If there were difficult situations I didn't want to get myself involved in, he would give me tips on how to maneuver around it without hurting someone else's feelings.
So it sounds like Andy was your first love, but now you're married to the love of your life.
First loves are always very difficult to forget.
Yeah.
And especially when Andy and I separated, it wasn't on bad terms. We separated because of career choices. He had a difficult relationship with his father, and he wanted to get away from Wales and England or United Kingdom as far as possible. So he enrolled himself into the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. And I didn't want to go to New Zealand with him because I want to go to fashion school in England and in Paris, to be closer to the fashion world. This is back in the early 70s. And, so we separated because of our passion for, or rather our ambition, to become successful in the field that we both chose to be. And it's difficult to separate, to not see each other just because of that. So the first year after he left, I was in terrible shape. I mean, I was basically looking for love in all the wrong places, and this was back in London. And luckily, Uncle James guided me back to sanity, and he got me enrolled into my first college, fashion college, was in Belfast in Northern Ireland, where there's nothing there. There was no nightlife there, and it was during the bombing, the IRS bombing.
The IRA,
yeah, the IRA bombing. So I had to stay
IRS
in the
bombs
hospital
us as well, but
time.
in a different way.
Yeah, in a very different way.
So I'm glad Uncle Jim stepped in and took me away from that for a year. I was in Belfast for a year. And then when I returned to England, I was a different person. I was totally refreshed and ready to take on new fashion challenges. Otherwise, I would have gone down the drain.
Wow.
So, can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, Bernard, when you had, there were a couple times that you and Andy were involved with a third person, in both instances, another of the secret society young men. And do you think that because I know in times you were jealous, during this time of complicated relationships, according to in the books, but in the long run, do you think that gave you sort of a better understanding of being able to be in a very successful long-term relationship?
Of course, because the way you look at life is completely different. If you have a three-party relationship, because I think it helped me to be more understanding of what the ego is all about. Majority of the time, I think it's the ego that is creating havoc. And and once you get past that ego thing, of jealousy, and look at life positively, you see things in a different way, and that helped me a lot.
Yeah, I think the ego is like 10 foot tall and weak.
Yeah.
It wants to be this big thing, but it's like you said with the jealousy, and I mean we've all been through that, and that's ego. I'm being hurt, my feelings are being hurt, or whatever. But we do have some comments here on Twitter, so let's get to these before they become obsolete. Robert Williscroft, he commented about 30 minutes ago. He said, "Twist my arm," and that's in response to having him on the show in the coming weeks. And Verwayne Greenhoe, he says, "Good to hear you in person, Bernard. I see your promotions all over Twitter. Congrats on your success. Lisa and I wish you the best in your business adventures." And Lisa is his lovely wife. And Mara Beth Brennan, she says she's got a question for you. She says, Bernard,
yes.
And by the way, hello, Mara Beth. Glad to see that you're out here in the audience. Bernard,
hey,
how old were you when those things with the secret society happened to you in England?
Old enough to know what I'm doing.
Okay. Succinct, straight to the point.
Yeah.
You don't want to say an age, apparently.
What if I tattle?
Age is only a number. Age is only a number.
Hey, we like tattles. Go ahead.
Well, let's put it in the lower teen range. So shall we say that?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be a legal problem in the U.S. these days.
I'm not commenting on this question because people mature in different degree, and some even like some young musicians at the age of 9, they were already superstars in the musical endeavors. So age to me is nothing to do with anything. It's a human creation because people mature differently. And like I mentioned, the boys that were in my school, or whoever, the boys and girls who were in the secret society, even if they're from different schools, we were very heavily groomed and scrutinized to make sure that we are mature enough to know what we are doing.
So do you two still have a restaurant together in Hawaii?
No.
Yeah, that was some time ago.
Okay, so that's no more, and your boutique is gone as well?
Yeah, well, we had a boutique in front of the restaurant, the Fire Dragon.
So So what led you to decide to write down this long story about your Harem Boys saga?
Well, thanks to my husband, who encouraged me to do that. And voila, here I am. He was the one that encouraged me. I never thought I would, write it down because things has happened so long ago. And it's nice to, I didn't think it was that unusual. I mean, when you live it, it's like part of me. So
yeah, it's the life
but
you
then
know.
So I don't think my education was that unusual. But then obviously to some people it is.
Did you envision 5 books? Or did you just start with number 1 and see where it went?
Well, because I was in 7 different households, Arab households, I thought it would be nice to document each one separately in one book. But then after the 5th book, I thought, well, it might get a bit repetitious although each household experiences is different. The gist of it is very similar. And so I thought, well, instead of writing 7 books, because the last, if I was going to write 7 books, the last 2 books would be not so much yes, it is about my experiences at the harem, but it's not about me as a harem boy per se, because I was then a big brother, to a freshman whom I accompanied to the last 2 households. So I was going to write about my experience as the big brother, of how I saw things instead of how I experienced things, as a harem boy.
Beem, you want to run one more commercial before we come back and talk to Bernard Foong some more?
Sure. We can.
You want
do
to jump to Finding Myself?
Yeah.
A lonely man finds love again. After 47 years of a great relationship, courtship, and marriage, the author found himself alone. His wife had struggled with a rough fight with dementia. She took a sudden and unexpected turn for the worse, leaving him alone for the first time in his adult life. He was 64 at the time, but felt more like he was 40 physically and 95 emotionally. For over a year, he had tried to go forward with his life, but when he was alone at night, his heart's emptiness reminded him that he needed someone to fill the ache inside. Loneliness is a killer, and he was dying from grief. He was dying inside because he had never been alone in his life. He told himself that he would be all right, but he wasn't, and he was fading fast. Then he found Heather. They were 2 souls drifting in a sea of loneliness and grief that found one another amid a building storm. Is she the one that can pull him out of an escalating depression? We'll see. Finding Myself Again is a sequel to Verwayne Greeno's book, I Remember Judy. Readers are posting comments like this. Finding myself again is like receiving a sign, so I can move forward with my life. Second chances are not to be missed. Keep searching and find yourself again. And I literally cried with joy for Verwayne and cried with new insight for my future, and know that I can love again. Thank you for writing this book and sharing it with us. Finding Myself Again and I Remember Judy by Verwayne Greeno are available in paperback and audiobook from Amazon.com.
And that's another one that I've read and I highly recommend. So get out there. And it's available on audiobook now too. So get out there and grab a copy.
Definitely.
All right. Now, Bernard, the 5 books. How long did it take you to write these 5 books?
Altogether 8 years full time.
That's not too bad.
Wow. It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I am very detailed with my descriptions, and I have a lot of information that I documented along, during that period of my life. So I was able to, the dialogues in the books are creative writing, but the gist of what was being said is the truth. And because I can remember who said what at 50 years ago, but I do remember during the gathering or whatever we were doing, what was what I learned from it or what came out of it.
Now, before we look at each of the 5 books, and real quickly, when people ask you, what is a harem boy? I mean, we're getting a pretty good sense here just from talking to you, but how do you answer that question? What is a harem boy?
Well, it's a very difficult, well, I wouldn't say difficult, but a lot of the times when people talk about harem, they think that, it's all sexual, and you are kind of thrown in there as a prostitute. That's not the case at all. It's if you actually look at throughout history, harems and being in the harem or being in court, like the British court, is very similar, because in the court you have ladies in waiting and you have courtiers who act as confidant to your patriarchs or the aristocrat, whom you are part of the household. And it's very similar to that, because we are trained to be good listeners to our patriarchs. And a lot of times the patriarchs bottle up things that they cannot say to, let's say, their wives, and most of the Muslim countries or Islamic countries, they're allowed to have 4 wives, and the wives would bicker with one another, or the children would have problems, and then the children from the first wife would fight with the second wife's children, and then the patriarch would be have difficulty talking to kind of releasing his stress to somebody else. So that's when the harem boy or the harem girl comes in. It's like voicing his or her problems to someone that is outside of the household. I hope that answers.
Yeah, so it's like a confidant, a mentor, a helper, even an assistant at times, just a sounding board sometimes.
Right. And we don't go around blabbing, all over the place what he did or what, all the dirty linens or laundry that was being aired to us. That's what we are trained to do. We are trained to be listeners. And if it becomes sexual, or emotionally involved, then it happens. But once we leave the household, that's it. It's terminated. That's the end. That's why we don't after my harem years, we don't keep in touch with our patriarchs, because once you are done with the household, that is the end of the story.
Wow.
And then the new batch of people will go in. Yeah.
So the 5 books they're all titled A Harem Boys Saga 1, A Harem Boys Saga 2, A Harem Boys Saga 3, but then they each have a subtitle, and the 5 subtitles are Initiation, Unbridled, Debauchery, Turpitude, and then the 5th one is Metanoia. Can you kind of run through those real quick and tell us what to expect as those 5 play out?
The first book basically is how I got from Malaysia. Like I mentioned, the first 15 chapters in the first book is about my family dynamics, and then from there on, how I got from Malaysia to England, and how I was groomed to go into harem services, and then my first household patriarch, and how I dealt with the different situations in that household. And the second book is about how
Unbridled.
I met Unbridled, how I met my through the first household patriarch, how I met my second household master. We call them masters, and all the woes and issues, whatever you call them, how we maneuver through the minefield. When I say we, meaning me and my big brother, Andy. And then the third book is again Debauchery. It's about my third patriarch, who was, at that time, it was difficult for him to come out as a homosexual man. So he had to put up a front, and he was in love with one of the Arab prince, who was a good friend of his. And so, the issues that he has, and how through my love with Andy, we shared with him, the joys of inverted commas gay love, and that to help him find solace in his aristocratic upbringing and his life. He was a sheikh. And then the fourth book is again about another patriarch who was a professional sportsman, and again, he has an ego as big as a football field, and it was difficult for him to come to terms with his losses. If he lose a game, he'll freak out, like I can't lose, and so again, Andy and I have to very gently talk him back to reality, so to speak. And about the places we go to, we in all the books we travel very extensively, because most of the rich Arab patriarchs, they all have private jets and private yachts, so we would just hop on the plane and just go. And it's like a rich man, kind of lifestyle or the rich and wealthy, but it's also filled with a lot of problems. And so in the books, I talked about how we dealt with the problems and how we help. We are sort of like therapists. We help them, get back on the right track. In other words, in short, but through indirectly, not directly.
Okay, now
if you know what I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then the fifth book. Let me quickly touch on the fifth book. The fifth book is more about my separation with Andy. The days leading up to the separation, of the difficulty we face, and the fifth patriarch. How. But it's mainly about our separation, and it ended with Andy flying off, to New Zealand, and I was left to cope with, how to deal with ending a relationship.
Okay. Now, earlier, Walter had touched on the movie contract, the movie version. But have you given any thought to who you would want to play you in there, or would these be unknown actors?
It would be an unknown actor.
Would it cover different years? Would you need maybe a couple of different actors, as they tend to do sometimes, where here's one when you're younger and here's one when you're older? Is it going to be?
I'm sure that would
how
be
much
the
of
case,
your life
yeah.
is this movie going to cover? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, it is really out of my hands because, when the producer takes over, the choice is not mine to make. He would be the one who decides, who would play me. Although he did ask, me to recommend some young actors who might be interested, and I did. And but a lot of Asian actors or young unknown actors, they are rather afraid to take on a role like that. So there is a young musician which I would like, an Asian pop star, so to speak, that is, quite well known in Asia, who looks kind of like me, that I would like him to play the young me, but I don't know. I submitted his information and name to the producer, and I haven't heard back. So I don't know what's going on.
Well, you never know. Now, this is 5 books. Are you working on a part 6?
If the first movie does well, then I will write Life After a Harem Boy Saga, because there is so much information about how during those 4 years has affected or groomed me to be the person of who I am right now. So I want to relate that, to all the different projects or my career path that has led me to make choices that those 4 years had basically laid the ground foundation.
Okay. We look
forward to that.
Yeah, we're going to need to wrap up here, but where can people find you on social media? Contact.
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter at a Herring Boy Saga or at Bernard Foong, or they can email me, which is young@aherringboysaga.com, or they can. I have a couple of websites. The book website is aherringboysaga.com. I have the fashion website, but I haven't updated the fashion website for a number of years. So it's the information in there is not current, and that's bernardfoong.com.
Okay.
The best way to get hold of me is through my email.
Okay. And as always, if listeners want to track down any Fresh Ink Group members, contact Fresh Ink Group. We have a contact form right at freshinkgroup.com. We'll make sure we get you connected.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
So thanks for coming today, Bernard.
Thank you.
We've been wanting to have you on for a while. We appreciate all your support over on Twitter and all of that as well. And we want to thank Walter for calling in today. It was fun talking to you, Walter. And we want to thank our listeners who joined us on Twitter as well.
Yeah, thank you for taking a little time out of your afternoon, since it's still afternoon where you're at, to join us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to talk to you too.
Okay, and Beem, where can listeners hear this show again? If they want to spread the word and have anybody else listen in?
Okay, so if you're not listening right now and you missed this show, it can be found on Twitter or YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type in Fresh Ink Group, and while you're over there, please hit the like button and the subscribe button and help us build that up. It can also be found at freshinkgroup.com under the podcast tab, beamweeks.com under the podcast tab, and stephengs.com under the podcast tab. And also, you can find us on Spotify. Just type in Voice of Indie, one word.
Okay, and remember, listeners, next week our guest will be Gwen M. Plano, who also goes by Gwendolyn M. Plano. She's a Fresh Ink Group author, and we're getting ready to republish her memoir about overcoming some abuse.
So we will see you all again next week. Again, thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been a part of Voice of Indie, a production of Fresh Ink Group. Spread the word, support our guests, then find us at freshinkgroup.com, and be sure to hashtag Fresh Ink Group.